top generals, Fatah al-Burhan, the army chief of Sudan, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who leads the Rapid Support Forces, a powerful paramilitary group. Their fight isn't just about who controls Sudan, it's also about who controls its gold, because Sudan holds some of Africa's largest gold reserves worth billions of dollars. Much of it is still untapped. Recently, the city of Al-Fasr in Sudan was surrounded by the Rapid Support Forces. Inside the city were Sudan military force and millions of civilians trapped. In past days, the RSF finally captured the city and unleashed a wave of destruction that horrified the world. Almost 1,000 civilians lost their lives on the spot. Hospitals were stormed, doctors executed, and patients shot in their beds. One hospital, the Saudi Maternity Hospital, saw more than 460 people killed in a single day. The country is still divided. The eastern side is still controlled by the Sudanese army, and RSF has strong ground power in the west. Sudan is facing one of the worst fights in its history. Cities are under serious
and into the surrounding countryside. And they're seeing conflicts in a country that has seen just 10 years of peace in the 69 years since it became independent. In that time, there have been no fewer than 20 coups, 3 civil wars, a genocide, and the country has split in two. So, why is Sudan so war-torn? Where are we in the latest round of fighting, and will the country ever see peace? Let's find out. This is Sudan, in northeastern Africa. It is one of the largest, least developed, and most war-torn countries on the entire continent. Today, there are 2 separate nations, Sudan and South Sudan. But all of this was originally part of one enormous country. The capital, Khartoum, is here, where the Blue and White Nile rivers join before flowing into Egypt. This arid northern part of Sudan is primarily Arab Islamic, the single largest ethnic and religious group in the country who dominate its military and political institutions. The greener central and southern parts are home to Christians and a plethora of other ethnic and religious groups, over 300 of them by some estimates. For centuries, Sudan was ruled from the outside. The Egyptians, the Ottomans, and the British were all in control at one point. But in 1956, it won independence and was immediately plunged into chaos. Sudan's newly elected government was weak, divided, and struggling to get anything done amid a civil war that was already underway between North and South. Within 3 years, there were 3 coups, one of which overthrew the government and replaced it with a military strongman, establishing a pattern that we'll see repeat over and over. Despite the coup, the war continued for another 2 decades, only ending in 1972. The man who achieved peace was Jafar Nemyeri, a former colonel who ran a strict one-party socialist state. Incredibly, he managed to keep Sudan's many factions from fighting, surviving another 3 coups along the way until 1983, when he attempted to impose Sharia law. This caused the South's non-Muslim groups to revolt again, beginning another 20-year civil war. Nemyeri would not see the end of it. In 1985, a coup finally got him, ushering in another very brief period of democratic rule. But once again, the government proved too weak and divided to rule. And in 1989, well, I think you can guess what happened. This time, the coup leader was Omar al-Bashir, a brutal dictator who would rule for the next 3 decades.
The usual
You
suspects.
might know al-Bashir as the man who unleashed a genocide in
Create
Darfur,
chaos in these regions,
this far western region of Sudan on the border with Chad. Darfur is majority Arab, like the rest of the north, but has significant black African populations as well. Tensions between these groups go way back, but were made worse because of climate change, which began in the 1960s and dried up a lot of the farming land. By 2003, with the Second Civil War still raging, these simmering tensions boiled over, and 2 African groups took up arms against the government. Bashir responded by arming and unleashing Arab militias known collectively as the Janjaweed on them, resulting in a genocide. The wider civil war ended in 2005 with a peace deal that guaranteed the South a referendum on independence, which easily passed and created the nation of South Sudan in 2011. But it didn't stop the fighting in Darfur, which continued until 2020. In those 16 years of conflict, an estimated 300,000 people were killed and 3 million displaced. It drew international condemnation and resulted in Bashir becoming the first national leader to be charged with genocide by the International Criminal Court. It was during this conflict that the 2 warlords we mentioned earlier met and became allies. Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hamedi, and Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. Hamedi, whose name means Little Muhammad, was born in Darfur, making him something of a yokel among Sudan's military and political elite. He rose to prominence fighting as part of the Janjaweed and then serving as its leader, with his fighters earning a reputation for shocking levels of brutality. In 2013, Hamedi rebranded the Janjaweed as the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, and used his connections in Khartoum to secure official ranks for himself and his men, along with a heap of government funding. He then used the RSF to grow his power. He secured allies in Libya and Yemen by sending his fighters there as mercenaries, and he also cut deals with Russia's feared Wagner Group, particularly when it came to exploiting Sudan's gold mines, which he used to line his own pockets. Hamedi's family now like to brag that they are one of the richest in Africa. Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, on the other hand, is a member of the Khartoum elite. Born in a village just north of the capital, he's a career military man. He served first in the border guards, then in a military college as an instructor, before ending up as a commander in Sudan's ground forces. It was this role that saw him deployed to Darfur, where he met and struck up an alliance with Hamedi. The two worked closely together to crush the Darfur rebels and helped coordinate overseas troop deployments to Yemen. Burhan was eventually recalled to Khartoum and promoted to Inspector General of the Sudanese Armed Forces, the SAF, while Hamedi stayed in Darfur. But the two men were reunited in 2019 when protests began to threaten Bashir's rule. Against the odds, Bashir had survived 5 coups and was still in control of Khartoum, but was about to face the uprising that would bring him down. What began as marches over an economic crisis quickly escalated into calls for a change in leadership, with Burhan and the SAF deployed to the streets. But as the situation deteriorated, Bashir summoned the RSF and Hamedi to help in what would prove to be a fatal mistake. Hamedi arrived in the capital, but instead of protecting Bashir, he teamed up with Burhan to overthrow him. At first, these old allies worked together to create a civilian government. But again, it proved weak and ineffective, so they carried out a coup against the very same government in 2021. This is where the roots of the current civil war lie, because the coup landed the two men in an uneasy power-sharing agreement. The goal was to return to civilian rule, with the RSF and SAF to combine forces. But, as ever in Sudan, civilian rule lost out. Deadlines lapsed, trust between Burhan and Hamedi broke down, and then a fresh round of fighting erupted in 2023. This is the biggest war you've never heard of, pitting two former allies against one another in a brutal struggle for power. It is the war that has wrecked the Sudanese economy and spelled disaster for its people, sparking the largest humanitarian crisis in the world today. This is the Sudan Civil War, and this is Battleboard. Here's Sudan as it is today.
Before we watch that, I want to get a few updates on the current conflict and genocide, and then also come back. We'll get to this another day.
Goodness, Sudan is currently going viral in Google Maps, and if you zoom into some of these locations, you can see some horrifying images, and people are actually placing pins around this saying free Sudan, help Sudan, pray for Sudan, and if you zoom in, you see more of this. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Google Earth, Google Maps, they don't update these images. This is from like a year ago. Well, verified news sources coming from October 27th of this year, they put a satellite image taken from space, and you can see discoloration in Sudan, and that is blood. There is a genocide happening in Sudan right now by the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, and it's being funded by the United Arab Emirates. Investigations show that UAE cargo planes holding a lot of weapons ended up in the hands of the RSF, and they're using these weapons to wipe out Sudan. So why would the UAE fund this? Well, the UAE sees that Sudan has a lot of land, they have access to the Red Sea, and most importantly, they have a lot of gold. So if they wipe out all of the neighborhoods, hospitals, and all of the people, then the UAE is going to have influence over Sudan's government, and most importantly, they're going to have access to billions and billions of gold. There's very graphic footage of this stuff online, so be very careful if you go and do research, but pray for Sudan, pray for Nigeria, pray for Palestine, pray for every single country that people aren't talking about enough. Oh my.
A Yale researcher says that more people may have been killed in Sudan over the last 10 days than during.
As dark as this.
South Sudan is over here, Darfur is over here, and here is the capital of Khartoum. It is mid-April 2023, and the country has just erupted into war. Unlike the past, where civil wars have pitched north against south, this conflict is pitting east against west. Operating out of their traditional power base in Darfur are Hamedi's RSF. Being a former militia, they are made up mostly of infantry, wielding rifles, machine guns and mortars. They also have a significant number of man-pads, shoulder-launched rockets designed to take down aircraft. What vehicles they do have are technicals, pickup trucks with heavy weapons welded to the back. These work best in fast raids in open countryside rather than pitched battles in large cities.
It is pretty disturbing that the world hasn't even
SAF,
attempted
meanwhile,
to
are concentrated in the east of the country,
at
with
least have
their
a joint
power base
front on this
being Port
stance.
Sudan.
Like,
They have a lot more heavy
it's
equipment than the
concerning.
RSF. Tanks,
But I
jets and
also
artillery
believe it's
guns,
intentional by
but most of
Southern
these systems
forces also,
are
so-
ancient. Some of their howitzers, like the M30, saw service in the Second World War. The bulk of their Soviet tanks date back to the 1940s, and their MiG-29 jets date to the 1980s. In terms of total strength, the RSF are believed to number somewhere around 100,000 men, though that figure needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. SAF numbers are even harder to pin down. IISS, a respected think tank, put them at just over 100,000, but some estimates are up to 300,000. As the war begins, RSF fighters quickly challenge the government for control in these areas of Darfur, centered around the regional capital of Nyala. They also seize control of parts of the neighboring Kordofan region around the city of El Obeid, stretching up to the western outskirts of the capital, Khartoum. Aside from Nyala and El Obeid, clashes also break out in Al Fashir, the capital of North Darfur, located here, and El Dain, the capital of East Darfur, located here. While the RSF are concentrated in just a few locations, the SAF are spread out across the entire country, all the way from El Dain to the Ethiopian border over here. They are also stationed along the Nile to the border in Egypt in the north. Because Sudan is so large, that means much of the army's fighting strength is unavailable for the battle that is about to erupt in the capital, Khartoum. This is Khartoum,
Also,
a
this is
city
2
which
months ago
sits at
too,
the
so this
confluence
is
of
like
the Blue and White Nile, where they join to flow north
I
as
watch
the
multiple
Nile
videos
towards
just to
Egypt.
get different perspectives. What I should also be doing is having my notes ready and taking down a lot of notes, but I brief myself at least twice a week. And then during the times that I have downtime, pick up any updates that I can. So
This splits the city into
I'm gonna watch 5 more minutes of this though, because I didn't realize this was like 2 months ago, and again, like I'm briefed enough, so I'll get to the 13 mark and then I'll go to the more updated videos here.
3 main parts. There's Khartoum proper down here, Khartoum North up here, and Omdurman, a closely connected suburb city over here in the west. The RSF are attacking the city from the west through Omdurman, while the SAF are attempting to hold positions in Khartoum proper and Khartoum North. On the very first day of the fighting, the RSF capture the headquarters of the state broadcaster located here in an important propaganda victory. They also claim to have crossed the river from Omdurman and seized this district, which includes the presidential palace, central bank and spy headquarters, and then the airport, which is located here. This early offensive into the heart of Khartoum city captures the military by surprise, and they begin to fall back. Using mortars and homemade rocket launchers, the RSF expand their control into Khartoum North. They also spread out to the east and south of the city, cutting off these 2
all
supply
the
roads.
families, those poor
Despite
kids
heavy
and
fighting,
children
the
and
SAF
women.
cannot hold back the tide, and the advance continues for the next 2 months. By mid-June, the RSF are in almost total control of the
Heartbreaking
capital.
doesn't even begin
They have
to
captured key
describe
highways
it.
to
It's
the
like,
west, north, east and south, and are in
holy shit.
control of the city centre and much of North Khartoum, including a large industrial area here. The SAF have been pushed back to the suburbs of Omdurman and beyond the industrial zone in the north. Just 3 SAF strongholds remain within Khartoum. These are the headquarters of the armed forces here, the headquarters of the Armored Corps here, and Karari University, a military training school here. Despite repeated attacks on these enclaves, the RSF are unable to take them, but it will be another year before the SAF can get in to relieve them. Until then, these troops will have to rely on supplies delivered by airdrop to survive. We're back in Sudan. The fighting we just saw taking place is here, and here's where we left the rest of the battle. Defeated in Khartoum, the SAF retreat to their stronghold in Port Sudan. This becomes the nation's de facto capital and nerve center for the regime. It is through here that the SAF will receive reinforcements and weapons from the outside, and it is from here that they will launch their counterattacks. For now, though, they're on the back foot. Through the summer and autumn...
Okay, so that's where I'll stop. Let's do a bit of reading. Let's actually attempt to learn. Okay. ChatGPT first. Oh, September 19th. What the hell? We're reading this. Jesus Christ. These were different reports. I was trying to get something more concise. Let me see if I can. I'm gonna have to. Let me just type in. What do we got? All right. Conflict, parties, and context. Fighting began in April 2023 between Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The war is centered heavily in the western region of Darfur, the capital, Khartoum region, and other peripheral areas with strong ethnic undertones, especially non-Arab communities versus Arab militias, paramilitaries. Historical precedent: previous genocide in Darfur, 2003 to 2005, targeting Fur, Zagawa, and Masalit. Humanitarian and lost figures. According to the International Rescue Committee and others, more than 13 people have been uprooted, displaced, or refugees since the war began. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, yo. Okay. That's insane, but we'll come back to that. A study by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine found that in the Khartoum state alone, over 61,000 violent deaths have occurred in the first 14 months, and many go underrecorded. Displacement: over 14 million, about 30% of the population have been displaced from their homes, including internally and externally. October 2025, mass killings occurred after the RSF captured the city of El Fashir, the last major SAF stronghold. Reports suggest that 1,500 people killed over 3 days, and testimonies describe ethnic targeting. The UN Rights Office states the crisis intensified over the first half of the year, with rising civilian casualties, growing ethnic violence, and grim humanitarian situation. Key recent event: after the RSF capture El Shafir in late October 2025, multiple reports describe massacres, mass graves, executions, and ethnic killings. The hospital attacked. The UN has warned this is the world's largest current humanitarian crisis in terms of displacement and strong warnings of genocide. Genocide, not strong warnings. It's just. What to watch going forward? Whether the ICC or other international tribunals will issue further indictments. particularly concerning genocidal charges, humanitarian crisis, access to besieged cities, and independent verification of mass killings in grave sites. How external support, military's aid from UAE, etc., may influence the conflict dynamics. The fate of displaced populations. I mean, you should have started with that. Like, hello. Protection and whether mass ethnic cleansing becomes more entrenched, whether the international community steps in. That should be the second thing already. Steps of enforcement and prevention measures to stop further genocide. Okay, now let us.
During the past 2 years in Gaza. Let that sink in. The fact that that comparison is even on the table means that experts believe tens of thousands could have been brutally murdered in the last couple days. This deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. Now, the longer this goes on, the less likely we are to get reliable information, as reports are now coming out that the RSF, or Rapid Support Forces, those accused of committing these atrocities, are digging up mass graves to hide their crimes. So let's get into what we know. Starting out with an assessment here from Nathaniel Raymond, the director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at Yale School of Public Policy, talking with CNN a few days ago to help provide some context, the scope of what is happening in Sudan right now.
Well, right now we're talking about a mass casualty event that could rival Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Just the bodies we can see on the ground is multiple 9/11s. And so the point is, a message to anyone, do something. We're in a matter of hours or days is the scale of time we're working on here. And so call your congressperson, call your senator, do whatever you can now, but we're running out of time.
Now, from what I can tell, the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab is really leading the charge in a lot of the assessments around what's going on in Sudan right now.
Seems like
so we've got quite a bit here from their executive director, Raymond, who was quoted in Al Jazeera on Tuesday that based off of the UN figures and what can be seen on the ground in El Fasher, quote, more people could have died in 10 days than have died in the past 2 years of the war in Gaza. That's what we're talking about. That's not hyperbole. And to give you an idea of that scale, this is, again, being quoted in Al Jazeera. They say in that same paragraph, more than 68,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's war in Gaza since October 7th, 2023. So the number they're using as a comparison is 68,000. Staggering what could be happening right now in Sudan. In fact, turning back to Raymond again on CNN, he compares this situation to the Rwandan genocide.
On Monday morning, we received word that 1,200 had died in El Fasher. By evening, sources said 10,000. By Tuesday, we couldn't reach them. And then, meanwhile, we're seeing a velocity of killing that can only be compared to the Rwanda genocide.
And again, for a little bit of context there, that genocide resulted in the death of between 500 and 650,000 people. So this is a very significant loss of life playing out right now. Now, continuing on with the Al Jazeera reporting, Raymond added that the RSF have begun to dig mass graves to collect bodies throughout the city. Quote, they're cleaning up their massacre. And as a little bit of a reminder, the Sudanese Armed Forces, or SAF, left El Fasher about a week ago, a little more than a week ago, and abandoned their posts there as the RSF moved into what was previously a humanitarian hub. Without the military forces there, they opened fire. They went into a hospital, killed patients, their family members, and doctors. The death toll there was estimated to be between 400 and 500. And right as soon as that happened, we started to see satellite imagery provided by, with an analysis done by, the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab. And we're going to run through more of that today. The killing was so staggering that they were able to see the blood-stained earth from satellite imagery and bodies from satellite imagery. That is hard to imagine.
It's hard to
Continuing with the Al Jazeera reporting, they say amid global condemnation, the RSF and its reporters have tried to downplay the atrocities, accusing allied armed groups of being responsible. The RSF's leader, known as Hemeti, has also promised an investigation, and he did right out the gate say, don't worry, any foul play, we're going to look into it. And I should note at this point that the RSF has a long history of brutal atrocities against civilians throughout Sudan. Raymond pushed back on this, of course, saying, quote, if they want to actually have an investigation, they need to withdraw from the city and let UN personnel and the Red Cross and humanitarians enter and go house to house looking to see who is still alive. Quote, at this point, we cannot let the RSF investigate themselves. In fact, the reporting last week was that the RSF was going house to house, murdering every man, woman, and child they came across. As of this reporting today on November 5th, 2025, there is not access for humanitarian aid or investigations granted to the United Nations, Red Cross, Red Crescent, or anyone else.
You gotta send.
Now, there are a lot of really graphic images coming out of Sudan right now. Unfortunately, there are some being shared that I'll put up on the screen here that are not accurate. So this is one that has gone relatively viral on the internet, purporting to show a large number of bodies massacred in one area with the blood pooling up there. This is a watering hole for cattle. Again, there are countless videos and pictures showing the atrocities in Al-Fasher right now. But down, so for whatever reason, this one seems to be getting a lot of attention. Benjamin Strick over on X, an open source intelligence analyst, put together a one-to-one comparison here. And what he points out is if you just go back on Google Maps, Google Earth to 2022, you can see that same spot. It's cattle gathered around a watering hole. So again, lots of awful pictures coming out. This one, when you see it, just know that it's being misidentified, whether on purpose or not. Now, looking at some of the imagery coming out, again, turning to the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, they released a couple pictures here in the last couple days. We'll put up on the screen. This first one, they say analysis of satellite imagery collected on the 1st and 2nd of November of the former Children's Hospital shows new dark-colored objects measuring approximately 1 to 3.2 meters in length, new thermal scarring where a cluster of objects was previously identified, and disturbed earth measuring 15 by 14 meters appears that is not previously seen in prior imagery from 28 October. Imagery collected 02 November shows an open trench with the plot of disturbed earth. It appears covered in imagery collected on 03 November. Children's Hospital in that one. Another one here, they say an analysis of imagery collected between 30 October and 1 November over Al-Fasher shows the new presence of at least 12 individual white oblong objects measuring approximately 1.38 to 1.8 meters in length, located 5 meters south of a mosque. Adjacent to the white objects is a new earth disturbance of overturned earth approximately 5 meters in length. The 5 meters in length, of course, being what appears to be an open trench. They say imagery collected on 03 November shows the white objects are no longer present. The earth disturbance remains visible. Again, the Yale Humanitarian Lab is accusing the RSF right now of going through some of these graves, burying a lot of the bodies, and then maybe digging some of them up and relocating some. So when some sort of international group does finally make it into Sudan, they're not able to effectively document the scale of these atrocities. Now, this is not a one-off incident here, right? The fighting and the violence has spiked in recent days, no doubt, as presented there. By Nathaniel Raymond, but the fighting is actually continuing to spread. And we got reports just yesterday, well, a couple big ones here. First off, overnight, it looks like the RSF shot down a Sudanese armed forces cargo plane. We've got some imagery here or some videos here of that incident. According to Defense Blog, they say Sudan's Rapid Support Forces say they shot down a Sudanese Air Force IL-76 Candid transport aircraft on November 4th, claiming that all personnel aboard were killed. Clash reports stated that the RSF used a Chinese-made FK-2000 air defense system to strike the aircraft. The system, according to the Post, was supplied to the RSF by the United Arab Emirates. The RSF has not issued a detailed description of the engagement method, and the Sudanese military has not commented on whether an anti-air system was involved. Again, RSF is backed by the UAE, so that would not be all that shocking. Not a lot of details on that shootdown, but that's pretty notable that that happened at all. On the ground, ABC is reporting an attack by the RSF on the Sudanese city of El Obeid in the northern capital of Kordofan province that just killed more than 40 civilians. They say the RSF fighters launched the attack, killing at least 47 people.
gotta do a better job.
People,
of,
including 9 women, according to the Sudan Doctors Network. They say the network described its concerns about the horrific crimes by the RSF, describing it as, quote, a scene that epitomizes the most grotesque forms of human rights violations and systematic killings. They say it has received field reports indicating that dozens of bodies were piled up inside of homes after the RSF prevented the victims' families from burying them. It's unclear if those are the bodies from the latest attack. Again, something to keep in mind as this plays out, and the longer it goes on without anyone able to get into that location, is the RSF is likely to try to do whatever they can to cover up these atrocities. Now, following the last video, when we discussed this, I saw a lot of comments asking about what the United States is doing or what the United Nations is doing. There is outcry at the United Nations. We are hearing them speak up and say this is ongoing, and it sounds like they're trying to get in there, and they're not. The United States they're not able to get in. Nobody's able to get in there right now. The United States appears to be pushing a peace initiative. State Department spokesperson said, quote, ending wars is a priority for President Trump, and the United States remains focused on working with our partners and other stakeholders to resolve the crisis in Sudan. Engagement with all relevant stakeholders is essential to achieving this goal. Given the immediate urgency of de-escalating the violence, we will continue to engage with the belligerents to end the conflict. And this isn't new. There were peace talks going on during the Biden administration. Those did not really make any progress. The war kind of stalled a little bit. The civil war never stopped, but it sounds like there has been some momentum gained in the last few months under what is being called the Quad in September. That's the United States, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. So there are talks happening. No indication that anything has actually materialized. Either way, a couple big things to watch out for in the coming days. I would expect the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab to put out more satellite imagery. We'll keep an eye on that. Of course, peace negotiations, if there is any progress there, hopefully that will see some movement in the right direction. And then, of course, any possibility of humanitarian workers from any organization being able to work their way into, especially Al-Fashir, but really anywhere right now held by the RSF as they continue these attacks across the country, specifically targeting Sudanese civilians. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
My heart goes out to all Sudanese people of all kinds, all shapes, sizes. We're with you. Well, at least the people with pulses. The people who value human life are with you. And may the governments, politicians around the world actually come together, because whether it's one party or not, just not having the availability resources, or just are simply doing this for their own game, we know there are good forces there. So it may not, obviously it will never, the losses are too great to, like, you can't make that up, but what we can do is actually attempt to get a solution, because I mean, displacement, you're talking decades to hundreds of years of trying to stabilize. So what does GBT says about this negotiation currently? On November 6th, 7th, the RSF formally agreed to a ceasefire proposal in response to the aspirations and interests of the Sudanese people. The RSF affirms its confirmation to enter into the humanitarian truce proposed by the Quad countries. The RSF also stated it looks forward to discussions on arranging for a cessation of hostilities and the political processes. I might be pronouncing those wrong, but all good. The announcement comes after the RSF capture of al-Bashar in Darfur, which raised major international concerns. what the cash obstacles are. The other party, the Sudanese armed forces, the regular army backed by the government, has not officially responded positive in the same way. It has conditionally approved the plan, but with demands, notably that the RSF withdraw from civilian areas and stop controlling these regions before any meaningful truce. Experts in the media warn that although the RSF has agreed word, implementation is highly uncertain. Some view this as a tactical move rather than a genuine commitment. Fighting and violence continue in several regions, even after the agreement is public, which a lot of these seem like these truces have not gotten any ground, like at least in terms of like implementing them and enforcing them, or at least some oversight of this. The context is extremely challenging. Yep, the RSF has just taken El Fashar, and credible reports of mass atrocities of war crimes are rising, with complicit trust and monitoring of any truce, which complicate trust and monitoring of any truce. Countries or organizations have stepped up. Multilateral organizations, United Nations is there. International Organization of Migration. Okay. Regional bodies, the African Union. This is who we should really see more information from. Intergovernmental Authority of Development and the Arab League have at least been involved in diplomacy or monitoring. This is from 2023. Okay, well, that I'm curious. Or South Korea. Excellent. Japan, Qatar. Excellent. Nowhere near enough, but good that there are actually like other forces involved too.
Sudan is now a sanctuary for a vast number of displaced people, many of them having fled to the city of Al-Fashir. The town of Tawila in Sudan is now a sanctuary for a vast number of displaced people, many of them having fled to the city of Al-Fashir, the capital of Sudan's North Darfur region. That city fell last week to fighters from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, which has been locked in a 2.5-year civil war with Sudan's army. The RSF, in a statement on Thursday, said it had agreed to a proposal from the United States and Arab countries for a humanitarian ceasefire. The Sudanese army did not immediately respond to the RSF announcement. Both the RSF and the Sudanese army have agreed to various ceasefire proposals, though none have succeeded. Witnesses say the RSF killed and abducted civilians during and after its capture of Al-Fashir, including in summary executions. Video from Tawila released by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees on Thursday showed people living in makeshift shelters. A representative from the Norwegian Refugee Council said some children fleeing Al-Fashir are so severely malnourished that treatment may not be able to save them. Up to 10,000 people have arrived in Tawila. The town was already overwhelmed by hosting more than 600,000 internally displaced persons since April who had fled previous fighting. The United States, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt called in September for a 3-month humanitarian truce in Sudan, to be followed by a permanent ceasefire.
So this is only the beginning of this. This is basically me streaming a little of what I am familiar with, different stories, different sides. Obviously, I'm going to continue to actually be more versed, be more prepared. I wanted to get a few different takes because I follow a lot of stuff internationally. So this is probably the most important, but I'll be more prepared when I speak on topics like these as time goes on. Also, I'm not going to be afraid to make mistakes in any information, things like that. So I do want discussion, and hopefully as my channel gets bigger, I'll be able to, who knows, maybe create a cause for peace. Hopefully by God, solutions should be had well before. If it takes that long, then we've just failed as a society, period. Failed as humans. But may God bless them, and may peace and some form of stability like be in the entire region of Africa, not just all parts. Obviously, this should just be solved. Like, there should be no even negotiation about that. But please let all parts just eventually, some way, somehow, in the future, I don't know how long, 50 years, 100, if a little further, have stability and as a unit come together. So that would be, that's a great vision. That's a great prospect. But moving forward, we're gonna end